All right, fantastic. Matt Lee, hello. We are live, my friend, and I'm tickled to bits to have Matt on, ladies and gentlemen. You know why? Because number one, I know and love Matt. Number two, he's got an epic beard. But number three, he saved my day today. So I had a calendaring snafu with a colleague of mine, and he wasn't able to attend. So I was scrolling through LinkedIn, it just so happens, and I saw your new logo, your new bearded logo. So that's going to be my first question to you. And I thought, Matt. So I quickly emailed you and said, hey, man, if you're able to come on and look at this. So, Matt, firstly, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us all about the new bearded logo, buddy?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me on, Eddie. Matt Lee, I have some letters, but at some point I'm just going to concatenate them into like chemical denotation, like it'll just be C5.
Yeah. Right.
But anyways, I actually had an MSP for 11 years and was in the cybersecurity side of things as we grew into a $40 million revenue company, and ultimately now work as the senior director of security and compliance for a company called Pax8. We're a cloud distributor, and I help give security guidance and get to be that loud bearded voice about cybersecurity initiatives and things we're going through. So thanks for having me on.
Right? You had your own live stream. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a lot of what my role is this external thought leadership aspect and bringing some of the fold through what I've been through. And so I started a show. It's Beard Banter is one of my YouTube aspects under cybermattlee.com or cybermattlee on YouTube. But I just interview executives and other people that I find cool that I meet on the road in different capacities. I think I've had Martin from the CEO of Malwarebytes on, just chatting about him starting code in his basement to try to fight bad guy stuff that he found many moons ago, right? Like, and just the beginning origin stories of a lot of these players, and we talk about security concepts and challenges, and yes, so I have a show. So
origin stories are some of my favorites, right? You know, because I love seeing the pictures, because when you see someone who's already in the media, by that point it's like, oh, that person's an overnight success. You don't see the couple of decades before,
right?
Right.
The head bumps.
Yeah, that's right. I remember seeing a picture of Jeff Bezos in, you know, wherever, I don't know, it just definitely looked like a strip mall kind of basement, you know, rental. And he just printed out Amazon on a piece of paper and stuck it.
Oh, I remember this one on the cork board, right? But it extended beyond the cork board, right? If I recall,
yeah, and it's pretty much just him and, you know, a vacuum cleaner next to him, because that's what he did that night. And
a 1960s era school desk, right? Like it was like this.
It looked like a real cheapo. Yeah, exactly. And then there they are today. Hello to Melvin, checking out the show. Great, marvelous. Hello, Melvin. Is that one of your folks, Melvin? Do you know Melvin? I don't know.
I don't. No. But or maybe I do. But I'm terrible with names. God has a sense of humor. I have a 156 IQ and an inability to remember names to save my life.
Oh man, you're going to get me off on a tangent. You start talking about IQ because have you heard of the Pareto distribution?
Yeah, or the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule in general.
Rule, that's right, exactly. Most people know it by the 80-20 rule. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. It even pertains to the growth of trees, or you know what music we listen to, whether it's classical music.
Interesting applicability.
It's got great applicability, and IQ is a very interesting one. Oh, we're going to go down a rap hole and get off of cyber if we talk about that. But I might,
maybe we'll do that for a separate show. You know,
pull me back because
then we get into the EQ IQ conversation and its correlation and how that plays into success. But yeah, anyways, that's tangential for sure.
Well, that's my point. Of let's use that as the segue then, play into the success of cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
So you and I were chatting just a few moments before the show about a headline. So I'll show this headline. This one is just mind-blowing to me. I'll have it on screen for you in a second, ladies and gentlemen. And so there it is. Look at this. The headline is this: for the first time in history, anyone can join a war.
So
this pertains to the Ukrainian president making an appeal for anyone with, let's just call it, a hacker skill set. So people who, generally speaking, dare I say it, have a higher IQ. Now, look, all of a sudden, people are, so if I don't have a high IQ, what is this, elitist? It's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is, there are lots of people around the world who have high IQ. So let's just say are intelligent people who don't have a means, let's say in sub-Saharan Africa or in some village in India, right, to use that intelligence for good, or to use that intelligence for making money. Now that's coming. The internet, blockchain, these things are changing the world. So those communities are getting electricity, they're getting smartphones. But now 400,000 people, I think it was 250,000 people signed up for a Telegram account within the first week of the president saying, can you come and help us? Now there's 400,000 people, Matt. What do you think, man? Good thing or bad thing?
I think it's interesting. If you to not take a side in that regard. I think the challenge you face is that it's not just the threat actors that we normally know and love, or the hackers that are hacktivists that are normally, like, if you think of Anonymous in that space. This is actually stretching down to just the regular public, right? I got a link from one of the groups that I'm involved in that said, hey, go to this website. And you go to this website, and it's essentially a client-side rendered, so on your machine, DDoS attack that has a command and control that's that central website, right? And so basically their advocation is just click this link and leave it open on your device, and we'll use you as a botnet, right? I mean, essentially to attack. And
in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict.
Yeah, this is just a week ago. I got this link. And so, I checked it out, obviously, in my sandbox, and took a look at it and said, hey, this is just a client-side rendered, DDoS attack that you're using my machine to deliver. And the guy wrote back, yep. So I think the cyber war aspect of this is broader than the conversation and the topic of just simply, this particular conflict and who's hacktivists and who's hacking. And this is starting to get into this global understanding that this is a weapon, that we can use this weapon of just the same way the threat actors take advantage of our trust, right? And say, you want to help? Let me use your computer for good. And they even went through instructions on how to use a VPN so that you could appear to be coming from outside the US for blocking mechanisms, right? And so,
so that's
really
just
interesting.
Compute power. Then they're basically, what these people are looking for is they're just saying, and they're being upfront about it. Then is that what you're saying? That
You can participate in this war by, and they're not even wanting compute. They're wanting, when you're talking about DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks, you're talking about an amplification makes it much more effective, right? If I had to get 1,000 water hoses to do something, it's much harder than if I could get one 10-inch water hose, right? And I'm oversimplifying, but the conversation is, when you get networks, what reflexive attacks do is they say, hey, I'm Eddie Doyle. Please respond back to me with the entire book of your DNS. Let's just say that's one attack, right? So then instead of replying back to Matt, they reply back to Eddie. So in essence, what they're doing is asking millions of browsers to do that without any education, without any skills, just setting up a DDoS where instead of it coming from a server, it's coming from your web browser, thereby your IP address. And if it's coming from your IP address, it's now creating a separate line of this attack for that fake Eddie to receive. And fake Eddie is the Russian government, or this site, or this infrastructure, or whatever it may be.
Wow. So and the other thing here, this was in the news about let's see here, Telegram. All right, let me fire this one up on screen for you. So this is where, so now that's the one. So let me just share that. So this article I read this morning is where 200,000, we actually counted 250,000 people on Telegram within the first week or so, using Telegram to help coordinate cyber strikes. So, okay, I like what you said, that it was interesting. I find it interesting too. It's a tough one, right? This is new territory for us. Yeah. So upside and downside. Downside, listen, it's going to be a mess. If 400,000 people are all jumping in and trying to coordinate over Telegram accounts, all hacking into critical infrastructure of another country, there's going to be collateral damage, right? And we use that collateral damage term when it comes to conventional warfare. And there'll be much more collateral damage of people getting hurt in conventional warfare, but that line is being blurred in cyber warfare. So
for sure.
And the other part is, it's so difficult to dig through this stuff and find out what is ultimately truthful and also what real targets are. Going back to the conventional warfare, I saw a headline over the weekend on, U.S. military vets heading over to Ukraine to, stand in the fight. And it's like, and it was a rah-rah, good for these guys. Yeah, but there's also a 19-year-old Russian soldier out there who probably doesn't want to be in the Ukraine, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't push
Yeah.
back threat actors like Putin. To be sure, this is not good, right? I can declare that easily, but there is always a cost to this stuff. And with 400,000 people doing keystrokes from the comfort of their own rooms, being removed from the actual conflict on the ground, I say be careful. There you go. That was
well, and a lot of this, like early on, a lot of the Telegram groups that were spawning up, let's just say allegedly, a lot of the groups that were spawning up, there were a lot of threat actors taking advantage of the situation. You know, a lot of security researchers and hackers and hacktivists and people that I call friends, that have much more skill than I, right? So I'm much more of a blue team guy than red. But you know, when you start getting into those capabilities, they're juicy targets, right? If nothing else, but for a crown and a jewel. And so there was a lot of like taking advantage of citizens that aren't very educated getting involved in these things, right? There's a lot of surface area, if you will, for a lot of the people that are getting in keyboard warrioring without any OPSEC capabilities, without any ability to hide who they are, without any ability to understand where it crosses from this private Telegram to my other assets, or this one link that's going to get me the piece I need that's really malware, or, you know, those type of things, and exposing information about yourself. Like, there's just, I just think be careful is probably a fair and accurate description, Eddie. If nothing else, but just for that personal, direct one-to-one. You know, there was I can't remember what the recent example was, but there was a gentleman that got an email or a picture mailed of his family with the red X's on their heads, and just said, "Hey, I know who you are," off of a cyber incident, right? Well, imagine when that is a concerted nation state player or activist in the nation state player kind of supported space that's now taking a little bit of a grudge towards these humans that have maybe, you know, kind of not in war, saying arm's lengthwise, we are delivering payloads like this. Like, at some point you have to have attribution capabilities and say, hey, listen, this is war. Like, here, I don't know. We're in uncharted territories around when does cyber war become an all out act of war?
Right. Yeah. And I think that when people are sitting in the comfort of their own armchairs and being detached from the potential devastation that they might cause through a cyber attack on, let's say, critical infrastructure, they might not realize that, when you hurt somebody, they're going to come back and hurt you too. So that's right?
And probably have better capabilities at same, you know.
So, and if I was the Russian GRU, I would be spoofing all of this, and I'd be getting all these 400,000 people working for me.
100%.
You know, pretending, right? You know, just pretending that, obfuscating the fact that, you know, you're in Russia.
Little art of war. Art of war conversation there, right? Like
the art of war conversation. It's Sun Tzu. Is that what you said? Yeah. That's right. Exactly. Deception. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that instance, I mean, I haven't really kicked that thought around, but in reality, if you were a loud enough person with enough basis, you could direct someone at something that might not be the infrastructure they think they're attacking.
That's what I meant. So, beautiful.
Yeah.
You put that very succinctly. Well, and then it leads to this, right? So the Splinternet. All right. So is this going to happen now?
Splinternet. I love the
Splinternet, my friend.
Oh, it's great.
So when I first saw, you know, that Facebook and a few other companies had decided, and again, this is uncharted territories. These are companies like Facebook, for example, that withdrew all of their services from Russia. And I think a whole bunch of, I think Twitter's out. Also, actually, Cogent Communications, which is one of the largest backbones, right? Actually, you're MSP guy. So Cogent Communications, they run a big backbone across the Atlantic. Is that right?
It says I understood it from the news articles, but I'm no more read in than you. Yeah.
Right. So by shutting off, and it's let's get
avenue
this article. I want to make sure I get it right before I get into this.
Well, and while you're looking that up, like Russia planned this. I mean, if you look at, you know, what, 4 or 5 years ago, they did their test of actually pulling from all the BGP routes and pulling themselves back into internal only routing, and, you know, as a country separated from the internet, you know, to kind of summarize. They've tested this, you know, so it's interesting to talk about it this way, in the sense that it seems like Russia has been preparing for this need at some point, is what it would feel like. So
I would imagine they would be smart. They are smart, and I would imagine they've anticipated this. So look, for instance, United States-based Cogent Communications, one of the world's largest internet backbone providers, has cut Russia off from its infrastructure for carrying internet traffic around the world. Okay, so explain to me, though, we've got a backbone. So that is just basically gigantic pipe, right? And that pipe goes to Russia and around the world, and that's how they get onto the internet, correct, Matt? Since you're
Well,
an MSP guy, and then does that mean they're cut off from all? There must be other big backbones.
So think about it this way: a non-MSP, just understanding of how networks work, right? So think of it this way: you have roads, right? Your city street could maybe handle 150 cars an hour. Your highway could handle 1,000,000 cars an hour. Your interstate could handle, and these are all made up numbers, so don't beat me up in the comments. But the point is that you have these different flow capabilities. That's the first part of how we get data around. The second part is that, let's say you cut off one of those. Let's say the highway is no longer accessible. What does your GPS do for you?
Right. Or
It reroutes you
Yeah,
into
yeah.
a different flow capable, maybe, that's not able to support that load, but it still gets the traffic there eventually, right? This is the point I'm trying to make, is that
Gotcha.
what you're going to see is that there's other backbones, there's satellite uplinks, there's other methodologies of travel, but it does cut off that speed potentially, right? You cut off an entire X gigabit or X terabit of throughput under that one cable. And so now this is actually kind of the point, is that the network relies on that GPS. Let's call it BGP, right? So your border gateway protocol, essentially, it's your routing of your different IP addresses. So like your street address changes how you get there, right? So as the GPS updates and tells you you're now flowing on this highway instead of that highway, right? That's the BGP. That infrastructure in general lives outside of Russia. Most of the time, right? It's in whoever AppNic or whoever runs the IP addresses that handles those ASNs, the routing language.
ICANN, isn't it? ICANN, isn't it? Those guys.
ICANN is the internet account numbering, if I recall, but it assigns it into different. Like ARIN is the United States version of what handles our IP blocks, right? That we route.
Okay.
In AppNic is Asia Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody can punch me for this, guys. I'm a technician, but I forget it. So, but the point is, you have your different.
Cut off their backbone. There might be others that go
Well,
through.
You cut off the pipe, but not that BGP routes. That's what I'm saying. Is Russia tested bringing those routes, the needs to be able to advertise their routes, run their network in a sovereign basis, all of their sites at mom and pop's local Russian grocer still functional, all of those things routable. ICANN being a part of this. But what they're saying is they've simulated the ability to bring that back in house. They have the ability to potentially number and access and route and function and communicate. Their GPS will work once we turn off the GPS, right? If that makes sense.
Right.
And so that's what it appears they've tested. To what efficacy, I don't know. I'm not in Russia, but it seems like that's what they're preparing for, is this Splinternet, this concept that we're going to take them off the internet and they won't function. No, they will, just in their own economy, which is also unseen. From the beginning of internet, it's been this ubiquitous, as long as you can access, as long as you can route. And now we're going to say we're going to have these individual spaces that I can't drive to. My pipe doesn't get there. I just run into water and I don't have a boat. Like, what creates the boats? Are there boats? Like,
right. That's the concerning bit for me. And it's interesting. Like, Ukraine actually did ask. So is the ICANN is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers,
right,
to take Russia's top level domains off, and they said no, which I certainly would agree with, because we're going. I've often thought of the internet this way: like 1440, Johann Gutenberg invents the printing press.
Right.
First time in human history that the mass distribution of knowledge is available to everyone. Up until that point, the religious elite and the monarchs owned information and therefore owned the world. So Gutenberg, first thing he does, he prints the Bible. It's like, all right, please don't behead me. Like,
I'm doing God's work. Please don't cut my head off.
Yeah, here's that. And then, 200 years later, we get the Great Renaissance, where we get Spinoza.
Oh, yeah,
and
information
and
shared and.
Right.
Yeah, we come out of some of the darkest times in history, right?
That's right.
That are recorded, I suppose.
And so here's something really interesting, Matt. This will blow your mind if you haven't heard it, mate. So 200 years later, 1600s, you get Spinoza and Shakespeare and all these guys, and you get the Great Renaissance. You get science, and it gives birth to what we have
believably
today.
From the proliferation of information sharing, right? Is the thought process.
Right. America wouldn't be a country if it wasn't for Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense.
Yeah.
Right. You can actually trace that back too. You could rallying the people. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I look at the internet in a similar way. It's kind of Renaissance 2.0. And I remember back when the internet was first.
I think the first NIST standard is based off of the printing press, isn't it? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
That's right. Back in those days. So I thought, well, we're going to get, world peace in no time. And we ended up getting pictures of people's food and kitty cat videos. Right. And I thought, why? What? That's strange. Here's why. Here's what's really interesting. So 200 years from printing press to the actual Renaissance where it really took off. So what happened? We were in the Dark Ages, so you're right, we came out of barbarism, but for 200 years we didn't get the Renaissance yet. Do you know the most popular book printed by the printing press in those 200 years was How to Spot a Witch? That was the most popular. Because think about it, we were a bunch of barbarians, we were a bunch of animals, right? This is the Dark Ages. It's called the Dark Ages for a reason, and
That's
so that
so
gave
funny.
birth to all of the witch trials and the witch hunts, and it's crazy.
Oh, that's funny. So you're actually pontificating that those pamphlets enabled the thought process of being validated of this must be a thing if there's books about it.
Here's the correlation I am making. Twitter, Facebook, and the cancel culture is all about how to spot a whatever, right?
Yeah.
Just label the person. And so now,
when aren't we much more nuanced than those labels? Like in general, isn't that the entire thought process? I mean, maybe we're a little tangential.
What people are trying to do is they're trying to make those nuanced labels fit for any particular person that they don't like the opinion of. And what I'm thinking is we need to get out of this period. Now, hopefully it won't be 200 years like it was between the printing
the
press.
density and speed of information flow should change things like that. I would think it's the same problem and the same solution.
So I think what we're doing is we have to get out of this tribalism craziness, this what I call witch hunting, which is happening now, and the potential Splinternet, which I think would reverse us back to, the Stone Age of being separate as people yet again. Because in 2015, here's a great discovery. We learned through DNA. We're all over the map here, my friend. But this is all part of an Ask Me Anything.
Well, nobody's asking any questions.
No one's asking anything. Exactly.
So we can just do whatever we want to talk about.
Well, because I took when I had the cancellation earlier today, I took it offline, and then when you said yes, I quickly jumped back online. Right. Anyway, there we are. So it'll live in the archive forever, and people will comment there.
That's all right.
But what was I saying there? So I was saying that, if basically we can get through this period of witch hunting, if we can get through this period of it's them versus us, right? And keep this sort of cohesive, I was telling you about DNA, keep this cohesive, we are one world, right? And it's like, okay, how do we respond then when aggressors like in Russia and Ukraine, how we are responding as we respond. But I think we can do better. So back to that little analogy with 2015, what DNA discovered is that we metabolize sugar in the same way trees do. So we share common ancestry with our fellow humans and fellow creatures around the world in a much more profoundly intimate way than we thought. Science is giving us that now. And I think all of us in our hearts, we know this. We know the Russian citizenry are beautiful, wonderful people. And we know that it's usually a few bad eggs that spoil the lot. It's how we cope with it. And so back to the whole cybersecurity industry on how we cope with it. Here's a great article, actually by a buddy of mine up in Canada, talking about email scams for folks that want to donate to the Ukraine crisis.
Oh, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
How many of these have we seen now?
Yeah. It's every time you have something this massive, right? Like the one of the cool ones I saw during COVID was they were standing up this pop up and go COVID testing tents, and they were just gathering PHI, just literally manually grassroots gathering PHI, throwing the test in the trash and driving on to the next one. Like,
wow,
it blows my mind. But yeah, anytime you have something created where the histrionics are large, there's a lot of polarism on it, or you think about it a lot, people are talking about it a lot in the same way. You start running into situations where people are going to make money off of it, and that's really the reality of it, right? So
one of the easiest ways, I mean, this is low hanging fruit, but for people who perhaps aren't in the cyber industry like Matt and I are, what my buddy here Rob Falzon, shout out to Rob in Toronto, is saying that is often fake domains are part of it. And so definitely, here's the habit you should get into, folks. If you are dealing with money, right, always double check domains, everything.
Yeah.
Just be extra vigilant when it comes to anything with money involved.
And if you're smart, you'll start getting things in place, technical or otherwise controls that start to say, if this domain was created 3 days ago, like, let's just not go there. Let's
now, how's somebody going to know that if the domain is, so how does a person
There's a lot of tools that do that, though, is my point. Like, I think as
Oh,
you're
cool.
starting to get into that, like whenever you start getting, what do I use? There's a free, it's not easy to use, but Cloudflare does a free Teams product if you're just a regular human. And it'll say, hey, listen, don't let me go to any domains DNS wise that are created in the last X, or don't let me go to new domains, or don't let me go to unproven domains. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that helps, because the problem is, like, visually, IRON scales looks like LRON scales. There is no delineation. A capital I and a lowercase l are almost identical visually.
Right.
Right. And so when you get into that, that's the tough part. They use visual tricks to get the words back and take advantage of some dyslexia problems, right? Like, so if you just leave that type of stuff to machine learning, leave that type of stuff to hard set rules, it's easier. Because you can go look it up. I mean, I get a new text message on my phone, and it was from USPStracking.com, right? And so I always do my research on it. I go sandbox it with Joe Sandbox, and then I go pull it up, and it just basically has been created 3 days ago by an internet privacy service in South Africa. And you're like, this is definitely the way USPS would do business. I definitely, but to a layperson, you need to take it out systemically, right? You need to find tool sets that just do that automatically for you. Would be the way I would do it.
Here's another great tip for people that are working in the Department of Finance. Forget the reply button on your email. Just don't use forward, and then type in the known trusted email address of the person that you've been dealing with for the last 10 years. I mean, that would eliminate
the challenge is, and I know that's pragmatic advice, and I know I'm being a little nitpicky. The challenge is what a lot of threat actors do when they compromise Sally's email the first time. So this person sending you an email is they set up a sister domain. So LRON scales instead of IRON scales, right? Or whatever you want to use for that. And they set up forwarding rules in the primary email box so that when I do email you, you don't get the email. It forwards over to the LRON scales domain where I'm sitting and waiting.
Right.
So a lot of the threat. So once they compromise, they set it up so that even that forwarding pragmatism doesn't help very much. What I would say to add to that is really have compensating, human controls, phone call, a separate line of communication that you store, right? And so if it's really sensitive, especially if they're asking you to, all of a sudden change your wire instructions for your next $1 million payment, or right, like send gift cards to your CEO, or
right. There's so much information in what you've just said. How do we get people to tabletop this so that it builds it into their DNA, into their neuroplasticity, right? Because like listening to us now, it's like, oh, I should do that. And that's probably as far as it would go.
Yep.
Which is sad. And it's not a critique of people not, getting on with it.
It's human nature.
There's too much stuff to do. And this just seems so technically kind of challenging. So how do we build a tabletop exercise into the daily routine of the people who are being targeted and are potentially, let's say, responsible for the company's money, so you could really bankrupt the company? What are your thoughts around that, Nate?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head for me. There's a lot of simulation stuff. Like KnowBe4 does a great job. There's tons of different players out there that do a good job of like delivering that experience where you get that email, maybe not the social manipulation massively, but it's not a tabletop, right? It's either pass or fail, and it's very personal, but it's also not often supported well. One of the failures, segue real quick. One of the failures I see a lot is that people focus on the negative side of those tests when they are doing them instead of the positive, right? There's a social proof kind of conversation that comes into play, right? Where, there's this concept in the 80s that if you dropped a human that spoke the same language as everyone, but was from a different culture into a culture, they would immediately start doing things that others do, right? It's this social proof, the need to be in this, in coherence with the others around you. And so instead of focusing on the negative, you'd say, man, Eddie, you guys did so great. None of you guys failed this test. It's so amazing. I'm so proud of the 80% that passed. The 20% that failed, go, damn, I want to be on that group. Right. Like that's not the way it works out. But aside from that, the point is, I think tabletopping this type of an experience where you come up with a way to simulate the CEO's account actually sending an email that is validatable to the CEO, asking for a Apple gift card purchase, and put it on your corporate card, you're okay, and then email me back, where it's simulated, where you're actually just asking it so that you can hopefully force the financial control that says, if you get an email like this, you need to reach out directly to that human or someone up your line and chain of command and make it their responsibility, right? And those kind of things, similar to an outside one. But if you simulated through that and actually said, and you brought the manager in to say, yeah, go buy the gift cards and all that, and then the CEO goes, I didn't ask for those. Like, that horrifying moment would be so catalyzing and crystallizing, right? Like,
wouldn't it now? That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, I like this, a more favorable tabletop would, because you're right. Look, I mean, I've seen all these phishing exercises. Some of them are amazing, right? They're
Yeah,
great
sure.
videos, great teaching, right? And then you get the phishing exercise. That's cool. But I'm not seeing it change. I still see the same 20% of people,
Yeah.
or 20% of people, rather, maybe not the same, clicking on bad links. So I'm not actually seeing it move the needle. Okay, so
I mean, the first time you almost dropped your baby, you got steadier hands afterwards, right? Like,
sure, that's right, exactly. Well, and a tabletop exercise is more about the entire environment.
yeah.
In my mind,
You
so
want to
you're
simulate
saying,
it emotionally for someone, right? Like,
but
you want to,
simulate the tabletop emotionally for somebody.
yeah. Let's say you have one AR person, right? That's going to be doing, or AP person that's going to be doing the payments out. This the worst attack I've seen is a business email compromise that was $1.9 million in cash flow for a company that was not able to survive that, shouldn't have been able to survive that, and they were able to pull it through. But it was through a lot of begs and borrows and promises, right? But the way that happens is if you found that AP person and just as the CEO wrote an email in somewhat broken English asking for these gift cards, please send me a pictures on this cell phone number, da, da, da. You'd simulate the CEO being compromised, right? So you now can't validate links. You can't trust the trusted sources there. It's definitely that CEO, right? And if you did that and had Sally be requested to do that, or have Sally be requested to do some action, and then have Sally then bring something that requires Sally or John or whoever it is, I don't mean, be exclusive or inclusive, but, have those people bring that to the CEO and say, hey, I just got this done that you asked me to get done. I didn't ask for that. Like that 3 seconds, that 5 seconds during that time of that just horror, and you could take it as long as you wanted. I would recommend not, right? But I'm going to lose my job. I've failed, right? I gosh, this is stupid. I should have seen this. Like, even that moment dawns on you, and gosh, I knew this was too good. Like, why would I, right? And so, like, if you did that and then just took that as a cost and educated that one employee, and then just took it and said, hey, okay, this is good. I'm teasing. It was us. I wanted to walk you through a tabletop simulation so that you could have this as an understanding of what they're going to try to do if they compromise my account, if they try to pretend to be me from an outside source that we try to protect from. But either way, they're after the money. And so we have to stop it right there where the money is, where that transaction happens. And I think simulating that, tabletops are great, like always. I love watching, we were at CSA, my CISO and I, at like an executive meeting, small group meeting, and Starbucks led a tabletop exercise, and this was a mix of executives. This wasn't just security executives. There were CEOs in the room. There were chief legal people in the room, and it was so cool to watch as we walked through this very simulated kind of very expansive attack on a large enterprise infrastructure start to unfold. In this example, watching the CEO ask, how quick can I get? And then turning him and say, no, you got to talk to the attorney. This is attorney time right now. You got to bring, like, this just freaking understanding of how bad it gets. And even though this is just a moment in chaos, if you've ever really been through this world, right? Like, I've been in 60 some odd different incidents. So like, when you start getting into that world, like, it gets a little bit easier. You're not as emotional, but in the beginning, it's extremely emotional. It's PTSD level. Like, it's traumatic stress. Like, but yeah, anyways, I think tabletops and any type of thought exercises that simulate the world, that put you in that kind of experience are awesome.
Well, and repetition, right? To change neuroplasticity, change behavior. Because you're right, that first visceral response from here's your gift card to the CEO, and I didn't order that.
Yeah.
That would be so shocking for the poor soul. So that's good, because that gives a very
it gives you reference material, right? Like, it's in there as reference material.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then somehow to repeat that activity on a macro level on a daily basis, I'd have to say, because, so just like 5 minutes a day, if you could get that kind of system in play, so that keeps people constantly, forget the reply button or whatever it might be. But But of course, the CEO isn't going to want people to be doing cyber training for,
No, I think the
much longer every
inoculation
day.
lasts longer than that. I think that the inoculation of that is actually, when it's that visceral type reaction, lasts longer and creates lasting effects on people. I've seen people that literally still go to me and go, "Hey, Matt, you didn't catch me on this one. I haven't administered their testing stuff for at all for years, right? But they still are so
Nice.
proud when they succeed." And so I think if you can combine that with the positive side of this and this attribution, I think we've put so much focus on repetition and less focus on efficacy. And I think if we could get more focus on efficacy to the business objective, we wouldn't have to focus as much on repetition, right? Like I, as a cybersecurity professional, I live this and I breathe it, but I'm also always thinking about that. And I'm always remembering that event. Like what drove me was $1 million loss for us through an acquisition, through a cyber actor that's just been arrested. And, I was the signed affidavit on the Soda Nikibi arrest in June of 2021. So, yeah, so it catalyzed me, and I get it. So I think that's what I'm saying is that if you have a large failure exercise, to Jessica's point on here, if you have a large failure exercise, so Jessica says, better to learn from failure in an exercise than failure in a real life incident. Like, totally. Let's control the blast radius of this and make it 0 blast radius, other than the intended impact, which is the whole point of an inoculation, right? If you think about it, right, is to give just enough of it so you're thinking about it, but no actual loss. And what happened in my business email compromise was they actually had internal controls. She did reach out to her manager. The manager called the phone number in the email instead of the phone number on file and spoke to the threat actor. And the threat actor confirmed and assuaged her fears from someone they never talked to. And they approved the transfer. And so they sent $500,000 out to the threat actor instead of company A. Right.
Wow.
And company A had been compromised in just the way I talked about earlier, where they had control of the mail flow, any email going back, checking it out, going, "Hey, I'm forwarding this to you. Just want to make sure this is really what we need to do." Da, da, da. Oh, yeah, that's me. Comes back from the other loop. Right. And so you see this like really interesting, everything failed controls wise. And I think the only thing that would have survived, and there's a talk about this, it was a TED talk, and I can't quote the girl, but she was amazing. But it was talking about that gut feeling throughout. Right. That we're trained through the urgency. We're trained through the way it's structured to ignore that gut. But once you've been in a situation where you've handed those gift cards over, the gut wins. Like, it's just the way it works.
That's very interesting. So what you're saying is fortify the gut.
Yeah.
Right? That's very technical.
The gut was probably right. The gut was probably right. When it sounded weird or it felt weird, it was right. You just ignored it because of the urgency. You ignored it because of the hierarchical position delineation. You ignored it because of the structure of the psychology that it's meant to do. But the gut felt it. Like, you felt it.
I love it. I love it because, sorry, give me the name of your show again with the beard. What is it again?
Beard Banter.
Beard Banter with Matt Lee, and all the cybersecurity experience you've got. Follow your gut, ladies and gentlemen.
Fair. Boiled down to TLDR to follow your gut. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
Exactly. That is a beautiful note to end on. Good to see you. Fantastic. If anything else, follow your gut. All right, Matt, listen, man, stay right there because I'm going to end the broadcast. I want to say a proper goodbye to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this. It's likely that you'll be listening to it in the archive. Much appreciated.